If you use an energy meter, it could be about to stop working. Hundreds of thousands of homes have a form of metering that will be obsolete from the end of June. So how can you check whether you're affected and what happens if you are? And why are so many people fuming about it? I'm Lucy Watson and this is What You Need to Know. Welcome to this quick briefing with our consumer editor, Chris Choi. Now, your shirt sleeves are rolled up, your jacket's off. You look serious about this, Chris.
Well, we've got an urgent deadline coming up. And I'll tell you what, as people listen to what we've got to say, I predict we'll lose some members of the audience because they'll go scrambling into their cubby holes, into their meter cupboards to try and find out whether they're affected, because some of the impacts of all this are pretty serious.
Now, this will come totally out of the blue for some people. First of all, and I'm one of these people who does not know, what is an RTS meter? What does RTS even stand for?
Well, exactly. Don't worry. This is not something about your lack of knowledge. In fact, there's an awful lot of criticism being targeted at the energy industry for not getting the message out more broadly. So let's go back to basics. Back in the 1980s...
When I was born.
Tiptoeing around what vintage either of us are in this, but I remember those days. Back in the 1980s, they were using very old technology. They came up with an interesting idea, which was to use radio frequencies, the same frequencies that you listened to the radio on, to use those frequencies to operate energy meters.
Okay.
The problem is that those signals, they're not really used anymore for listening to the radio. They're the old Radio 4 long wave signals. So the BBC is about to switch off those transmissions. And therefore, this whole category of electricity meters is about to become obsolete. And there's a deadline coming down the track like a guillotine of June the 30th. So just weeks away, and yet so many people that are affected by this don't realise that they are, and many people, like you, have not heard about the issue at all.
So RTS, radio...
Tele-switching service.
Right,
radio tele-switching service. The radio bit being that frequency that is about to be switched off.
So these people, or people should have been these machines, these meters, whatever we want to call it. You can see my ignorance here, can't you? You can hear it. They should have been replaced, surely, by the energy companies. Many haven't. How many are we talking about?
Well, this is the main story that we're trying to get out there, because the figures that we have show that still in use, in people's homes, perhaps without them realising, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, 365,000 still in use. And what people are worried about is that, in fact, the energy industry have known about this problem for years. And yet now, with just weeks to go before this deadline, we've got hundreds of thousands of them still in use. And there are all over Great Britain. What is worrying from my point of view is that they're very often in homes in quite remote areas, quite a lot of vulnerable households with older people, perhaps with children in, and the consequences of having one of these non-upgraded meters on your premises can be pretty serious.
So what happens if it's not replaced in time?
Well, the warning is that your heating could end up being stuck on or stuck off, because...
So you're either chilly or broke?
Yeah, and particularly to do with your hot water, as well as your heating, is affected by this in many, many households. The really worrying thing that I'm discovering is that your heating can get stuck on or stuck off. You could end up not knowing how much you're actually using, which therefore has a financial knock-on, and it might mean that your bill is not what you expected. It could be higher than you expected. Is all this fair? None of this is the fault of the customer.
And I'm guessing they're quite cross about it.
And you've got this problem. And there's a lot of criticism from individual customers We've spoken to one in Edinburgh called David Bateman. He's one of the people that actually knew about this as an issue. He's tried to get his meter replaced, and it's just not happened. Here he is.
They gave me a time slot, and they did turn up. I won't say they didn't turn up, they did. And said they couldn't change it. Now, I've had various reasons. I've had, since then, 5 such appointments. No kidding, 5. I have the dates. With time slots, and they have always come out, but they've never changed the meter.
Well, poor David Bateman there in Edinburgh, far from alone. What I'm told is that some of the replacement operations are pretty complicated because, of course, this technology in some cases is dated
That's
back
no excuse
40
for
years.
not replacing them. Just
Well,
because it's
absolutely. But up until very recently, an insider has told me that up until very recently, the energy industry didn't have solutions, technical solutions to replace all of these obsolete meters. I'm told they now have,
Okay.
but clearly there is this enormous backlog, 365,000 customers with the meters. People watching and listening to this podcast could be among that group. We've heard about the potentially serious consequences that your heating, your hot water might be stuck on or stuck off. You could end up on the wrong tariff. And of course, once you've got the new meter in, your tariff will have changed anyway. So what will you be paying? You can imagine the lack of clarity and the confusion that's building up here in the background.
So you said at the very, very beginning that we might lose some listeners or watchers as people
Yes.
go rummaging
Is this
around
the
in
moment?
cupboards
Is this the
to
moment?
find out if they have one of
Yes,
these meters.
prepare to rummage.
How do you know if you've got one of these meters?
Well, I've become an expert in, snooping.
Rummaging.
Yes, snooping under people's staircases and looking in their meter cupboards. And I can give you some guide onto this. Now, most of us know roughly what an electricity meter looks like. You'll have that little wheel that goes round in the centre on the traditional meters. Now, alongside that bit of apparatus that you'd expect to see as a meter, there is likely to be a second box with these RTS meters. A little black box normally, and it will say either radio tele switching or RTS labelled there alongside the main meter box. There'll be a secondary one.
Just by you saying black box, then I'm thinking, ooh, I've got one of those in my cellar.
Well, go and
Have a
check.
little check.
When I said
when
we'd
I get
lose
home.
some people, I didn't expect you to be at the centre.
I'm off. You want to just manage this podcast on your own?
Well, I urge you to have a look because as
I will.
the consequences of having one of these and not doing anything about it are pretty severe. Now, what the problem has been, I think, has been that the energy companies have been contacting the people that have got these meters and saying, look, we've got to get them changed. But you know what life is like. A lot of people think, hang on a minute, this is some kind of scam, because those are so frequent now. When somebody approaches you out of the blue and asks to come into your home and start fiddling around with equipment. So there's that side of it. The second thing is that people think it's some kind of marketing exercise, maybe linked with the smart meter installation program. So
I mean,
it's
understandable.
absolutely. And it's possible, I think, that a lot of customers have been approached by their energy companies, but they've either ignored it, they thought it was a scam, they thought it was a load of nonsense, and they haven't engaged with the process. So therefore, we've got this very large number of people that could be affected. Earlier, we spoke to one of the consumer groups that's really worried about this. They're saying that the whole thing has been mishandled by the industry. Here is Gillian Edmond from Advice Scotland.
I think the problem is that people don't know they have these meters. They've had communication from the suppliers. In some cases, they haven't had a great deal of communication from the suppliers. So they're then hearing about it through the media, through word of mouth, through neighbours who maybe had to switch their meter. And of course, they're understandably concerned that their heating system won't work at all.
This all sounds like a bit of a mess.
It's a mess, isn't it? I mean, isn't it ridiculous that we're talking about people hearing about this
But
through
also,
word of mouth?
the time span as well. There's not very much time till June
No.
the 30th.
Yes.
So, that, this is very much last-minute chaos that you're informing people
And when I
about.
tell you that we've looked into this, and at the moment, the current rate of upgrading these meters is 1,000 a day across the whole of the sector. With so few days now left,
We haven't got
in
enough
this month,
days left
We haven't
for
got
it to
enough days
happen.
left. Have they got enough engineers anyway, even if they had all the information that they need? So this is a big problem. And Mess is a very good word to use. I spoke to the...
Just one I came up with, short.
Well, I think it's a logical one because this has been coming down the line for years.
Mm-hmm.
And yet now there's this last-minute dash, which is causing uncertainty.
And unnecessarily so.
Absolutely. So we put some of these points to the energy industry's spokesperson on all this.
Because, let's face it, the vast majority of people will be worried about, what do I do if I'm out of pocket, ultimately, by this?
Precisely, because there can be financial implications here. First of all, if the meter goes wrong and you're charging at the wrong rate and at the wrong time, your bill could be higher, could be unpredictable, could be completely wrong. You wouldn't really know what you're doing. And then, of course, even after you've changed, you'll be on a new tariff. So what is the guarantee that all of this, which is not the customer's fault at all, won't end up adding to their financial worries? Well, we spoke to Ned Hammond, who speaks for the energy industry on this matter.
There's a possibility that some customers may lose out in some scenarios. The worst thing that could happen is that customers could experience their heating and hot water being stuck on or off.
He trivialises that.
Well, I don't think he meant to, in fairness to him, trivialise it, because he does accept it's a serious issue.
Yeah.
It is serious, and I think we're going to have to start concentrating attention on this, because there are hundreds of thousands of households that may not know they're going to be affected by exactly that kind of problem. In this industry that's constantly boasting about its smart meters and its wonderful digital technology, we've got this kind of dinosaur technology in hundreds of thousands of homes. And we already know, if we're looking at the rate of upgrade, they're not going to meet the targets. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be able to change 365,000 of these meters by the 30th of June. And what the industry is saying is, well, look, we start to phase out from June the 30th, but it will be phased. So it's not all going to be switched off at once.
It's not like that.
But the problem is, they give no information on what the phasing is. So you don't know as a customer whether you're going to be in the first phase that switches off at the end of the month or later. We don't even know how long the phasing will go on. Mm-hmm. I'm told by one insider it's likely to go on until September. But if you look at the current rate of upgrades, even by September, it's likely that there'll be people who still got this old technology and are facing all of this uncertainty.
Have you got any advice for anybody who's a bit worried about
Get rummaging.
Get rummaging.
I'll tell you the most important thing, because it can be...
And then what, though? If I go home right now and I say, I've got an RTS, what do I do then?
If you are at all concerned, phone your energy company. I am reassured, because one thing this industry is not short of is reassurance. They tell me that this now is their top priority. Top priority. So that if you phone and say, I believe I might have an RTS meter, a radio teleswitch meter, they should be able to use their database to tell you whether that is correct, and they should be able to give you an appointment, and they should be able to make sure that whatever happens, you're not disrupted in those very serious ways where your heating and hot water could be affected.
Chris, as ever, you are a very reassuring voice. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or on any other podcast platform for a whole range of our quick briefings. Until the next one, thanks for joining us.